this guy truly is a remarkable mind on journalism and media. And now his column is about media and politics. How about it for Jim Avila, everybody?
Good morning, Mark. And you probably realize that I have never gotten down in my entire career.
No, yeah. You are...
I'm old enough to have known the song, but I was also quick enough to turn it off.
How dare you? That represented a robust part of our nation's musical evolution.
Hard to believe, but I was never a disco guy. Yeah, hard to believe.
I love that disco music, and I keep hoping it'll come back.
He was high and drunk.
Well, I was in an altered state much.
I actually covered Disco Demolition.
Oh, yeah, in Chicago.
I was in
right?
Chicago at the time as a reporter, and a big disc jockey there named Steve Dahl had a big event where he was going to break and destroy disco records in center field, and it became a riot. They had to postpone the game because
so I mean, it was a radio promotion stunt that became something out of control. And then, as Jim says, they were going to, I think, because was it the riot, and there was also fire, wasn't it? Where they blow them up or something?
Well, there were fireworks. Yeah, there were fireworks involved.
I see.
And I would think there was some drinking involved.
Yeah, I would imagine that there might have been some alcohol.
I'd be willing to bet my lunch that there's alcohol.
So it's interesting. We should talk about that another time because it was mentioned as, and never in a million years thought we were going to talk about this, but it was mentioned as a problem thing. Again, it was done as a radio stunt, but I'll give you the most serious thing that was associated with it from a controversy standpoint was racism. They suggested that being anti-dance music, being anti-disco made it anti-black. That was something that was very much talked about. I'm sure that, at the time, that was in the zeitgeist of what you were reporting on.
In Chicago? Come on. Racism? The most segregated city in America? I find that hard to believe.
I like the new Jim Avila can say anything. Doesn't have to worry about the processes, protocols.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
Yeah, he doesn't have to worry about any of them anymore. All right, so your latest is for Barrett Media. It's about covering RFK Jr. You talk about.
You're a fan, aren't you?
I'm not a fan. I'm troubled by how unquestioning people are as they attach their wagons to that horse. What I would distinguish myself, just because you asked my own views, I try to follow each and everything that the dude says, as opposed to, he's just a wacko, he's always saying a bunch of crazy crap. He is saying a bunch of crazy crap, but then I'm trying to find, is there anything in there that does check out? Certainly his representation of the vax and the representation of alternative therapies, which doesn't get enough ink either, is incorrect. He talks about the lack of double-blind studies. He talks about the fact that there were no double-blind studies for remdesivir or for, what's the other one? Ivermectin. But there were. Now, I also don't think that those things should be barred. I think you should have, if that's what you want, you should be able to seek that treatment. I didn't like the way that there was sort of a, anyway, I'm talking a lot, but my point is, Jim, I'm not a, I don't.
You don't dismiss him out of hand.
Exactly. I don't dismiss him out of hand. I felt really compelled to get you on today because I think, you write about what I consider is the issue in America, which is media and politics. I love that you're writing that because you are someone who's been in the belly of the beast in both, right? And so how to cover this guy who's this fire hose of stuff, he just hits you with all this stuff. You had a term for it in your column.
Yeah, it's called Gish Gallop. So that is to hit somebody with a fire hose, or I call it waterboarding of disinformation, so that the interviewer can't get a word in edgewise. And as soon as you counter one thing, he's on to the next. Like on the the Joe Rogan show, he talked about the CIA being after him, and when questioned, or he has to be careful because the CIA killed his father and his uncle, he says, John Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy Sr., and so he has to watch behind his back too. When pressed for details, he then says, I'm not an expert, and moves on to the next crazy thing. And that's the problem. Not that Joe Rogan was ever going to challenge him anyway, but others, Elizabeth Vargas on News Nation, is it? Yeah, News Nation. I always get News Nation, Newsmax mixed up. But News Nation held a town hall with him. And Elizabeth is a friend of mine, and she did a pretty good job. She was trying hard. But the problem is that they just go from one subject to another, one lie after another, and there's such a torrent of lies, you can't fact check it in real time. That's Gish galloping.
Yeah, that's interesting. It was named, I guess, for someone named Gish who did that, who blasted a bunch of that stuff out there. So, that
he was a creationist, and he would get in debates.
Right?
He believed he was anti-evolution, and this was in the 90s. And it's kind of a surprise to me when I found the term. In researching RFK, I read a couple articles that used that term, and they explained that this guy Gish was in the 90s, and I thought, come on, Gish galloping had to be invented during the Trump era, right? He did it. Trump did not even invent it. He just uses it. Maybe he doesn't even know what it is, but it was originally from the 90s.
Yeah, and it's a very effective way of arguing and establishing. So you can, argue for your position and establish your position and do it with such like almost this Gatling gun of information and disinformation. So it's impossible to catch it all and to do something. So that is the environment that we find ourselves in, both with RFK Jr. and you mentioned Trump as well. And there are others, but I think those are sort of Pence. Is that what you said?
Yeah, Pence is. I wrote about that a couple of weeks ago. Pence gets on a talking point, and in that slow, monotonous way that he speaks, just doesn't stop. He just keeps going and going and going, and it's a filibuster. I'm sorry,
right? That's almost a different style. That's that. As you say, it's he sounds like he's trying to kill the clock. He sounds like he's got a lead at the end of a basketball game, and he's trying to, not have to
wear you out.
Right, exactly. Whereas Trump and RFK Jr. really come at you hard, and RFK Jr. is very smart. He is not, he's not an idiot, and so he speaks with a credibility, with a command of the language, a command of ideas that I think help establish credibility, and that's really what it's about, right? It's a dynamic of establishing credibility and charisma. So,
he's got the Kennedy name. Yeah. How can you not?
You come into the game already. Yeah,
the nephew and son of legends in the Democratic Party. So it's almost you can't. First of all, a lot of people argue we should just ignore all these conspiracy theory people. Okay, we should not put them on television or on radio, on the internet. We should ignore them. They shouldn't be allowed on social media. And in fact, RFK was banned from social media for COVID misinformation for a long time. But when you got a name like Kennedy, how do you not, he's going to be able to get in there and talk because he's a Kennedy. And that's the first problem, is that you can't ignore him.
How do you cover him then? You, in your piece, you address, and this is interesting to me because I kind of want to take you on one of the things that you suggest, just because I think it's both logistically problematic, and I don't think you'd like it done to your candidate. But that said, tell me what your theory is on how to cover these people like RFK Jr.
Well, there are a couple theories. I think the best theory is probably not the one you disagree with, which is to do it all on tape. And then you're able to go back, and when you do it, you can either add information or you can rebut it on tape as it happens, and therefore you're not overwhelmed in a live format by this gusher of information, which is what Trump did in his town hall. The other thing that you can do, which I think is if you're forced into a live situation, is seize on their most important theme. In other words, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his although he doesn't want to talk about it so much on the on the campaign trail. But what he is known for is his anti-vax claims. So if you attack him on those claims and you are equipped with information, you're equipped with the fact that COVID-19 vaccines killed 9 people in the United States, okay? 9 people, and for heart problems, and it was the Johnson & Johnson that did it. And it saved 200,000 lives at least, maybe millions of lives. That's the number one thing you hit him with. Then his vaccine claims began way back when. It didn't begin with COVID. He was against all vaccines. And he adopted a claim that was popular back then, and still is with him, that mercury in vaccines was poison, and it caused autism and could kill children. They shouldn't be given vaccines. Well, you should be equipped with the fact that it was not the same mercury that's in fish protein that we have a problem with, that is poison. It was a totally separate protein element and had nothing to do with that protein. And they stopped using it. So it's not even in use anymore. So my point is, you hit him with that, and then when he goes on to the next one, you say, wait a minute. Why should we believe you on this one when you were so wrong for so many years on that one, and banned from social media and science journals said you were crazy? Why should we believe you about anything? That is a tactic that I think you disagree with.
The tactic actually that I disagree with is the first one. I don't think it's possible to record something, and I mean to tape something, and then stop it on an ongoing basis as the town hall, whatever they call it, the sit down, the fireside, whatever the hell it is, down home with, stop it and then go, let's just stop for a second. Those claims that Mr. Kennedy made are provably false, blah, 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 etc. Then you go on with the sit-down town hall thing. Then you stop it again, and you go, let's stop again. What Mr. Kennedy is claiming here has not been proved, blah, 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 blah. You end up with, Jim, a refutation, which is a ding word, of everything that he has said. Perhaps, you're calling him out on all of these different misrepresentations, but you've now become an advocate in such a way that I think it's not going to sit well with an audience that's watching. It's as though, and let me put it and make a finer point on it. If I have Joe Biden on a sit down, just to pick him, he's a mainstream candidate, right? Democratic candidate, likely. And he says, well, we supported the war in Ukraine because it was clear that Vladimir Putin was moving to both encroach upon Ukraine and use Ukraine as the footstool on which he would then spring to other countries and dominance, blah, 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 blah. Or this is a wanton act of aggression, whatever he says. How would you feel if Fox News stopped that and said, well, that's in dispute? The NATO alliance seemed to be broadening, and from Putin's perspective, blah, blah, blah. You can see how if that becomes the coin of the realm, this sort of stopping and correcting way that the media treats these things, you won't like it when your guy's in the barrel, will you? I mean, speak to that if you would.
Okay, so here's the difference. Joe Biden does not gish gallop. He's not going to go through a list of talking points and misinformation. He just doesn't do it. So you don't have to do that. Would you? But I think with Joe Biden, an effective technique is just to say, like you just did, but Mr. President, that's not really been proven yet. How do we really know? Ask a follow-up. That's all you have to do with Joe Biden. And then he will answer the follow-up and you go along. It's different when you have a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or a Donald Trump. They don't allow you to refute it. He'll do that. Trump will do that. Excuse me, and interrupt you, and he'll go on and continue to overtalk you. Biden doesn't do that. And so you have to watch which candidates you're talking about. Also, the other effective way to do this is through Chiron, through supers at the
Yeah.
bottom, the words at the bottom. You can do it that way. You can just put up a simple disclaimer which says, when they're making this, you don't have to go into all of it. You just say that is a disputed claim, and in fact, RFK has been shown to be wrong about this by every scientist in America, except for fringe ones. And then you move on. You can do it with Chiron. On radio, it's more difficult. You have to stop, as you say, and you have to refute them point by point. So, is it going to be uncomfortable in some ways to listen to? Maybe, but it's the price I think you have to pay to put these people on. You can't just let them gish all the way through. You can't let them do it. That is just not journalism. That's holding a microphone. That's a mic stand.
There's an unholy alliance between RFK Jr. and Steve Bannon, and some of those who are in Steve Bannon's camp. And in my judgment, Steve Bannon may be one of the most dangerous people in modern American history.
Yeah. We'll get an argument here.
And RFK Jr. and Steve Bannon being allied in any way, they're both, I mean, if you view the deep state as a threat, if you view these sort of institutional aspects of government as a threat and as a problem, and I know that they're not without problem, but and the deep state is total BS. I mean, the deep state, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I would have met somebody who is part of the deep state. I mean, I knew a lot of people. But that's the point. There isn't a deep state, guys. It's right out there in front of you. You can see the game is on. There's no sleight of hand. Everybody's bought and paid for. They don't need a deep state. They're playing you right in front. But anyway, to the point, Bannon and people like him want to see RFK Jr. succeed, not because necessarily they're big RFK Jr. fans, but because it opens the door, obviously, for a Republican candidate to stroll in. He will be so carved up, will Joe Biden or whomever, that it'll be an issue to actually win the election. Isn't that what's happening as well?
Yeah, he's a nuisance candidate, is what I call him in the column. I think he is there to annoy Democrats, to own the libs. He is propped up by Republican money and money from Silicon Valley as well. Some reason these tech heads think that Robert F. Kennedy is going to help them. And I didn't really get to the bottom of that, and I'll have to investigate why that is. I don't know why. But the money comes from those folks. And it is just to kind of throw a wrench into the Democratic issues. But it's not really going to work because it's just in the primaries. And in the primaries, he gets 15% in the polls, and most of that 15% are Republicans answering that they would support him, and it's not Democrats who are going to support him. So he's not really a factor, but his only factor is to get out there and he's the Chris Christie without facts of the Democratic Party. He's going to be out there and just kind of annoy people, and he is doing that. If Biden wants,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying if Biden stays in the race, which I've said in this program before, I hope he does not. He will be the nominee. Unless he has a stroke, he's going to be the nominee. I don't think there's any problem, any chance, any other Democrat. I mean, the only other Democrat who has been campaigning and has already said he won't try this term is Gavin Newsom, he would have a shot, but you're not going to unseat an incumbent president. You're not, and an incumbent president who has a good record. He's doing a good job.
Yeah, but it's all
only
perception.
Fear is his age.
I really like your column for that reason as well. Media and politics. It's how media messages, right? Media defines the framework. That's why media was powerful in building the image and profile of Donald Trump. They created this notion that he was a successful billionaire, even though he was a wildly unsuccessful businessman.
7 bankruptcies.
Yeah, fraud. His charities were a fraud. Everything he touched was a fraud. But the image of Donald Trump, which is all that the cultists needed to hang on to, was associated with his success, and the media gave him so much play. So I think the media is very much responsible for building up Donald Trump and giving us Donald Trump. And that's why I love that you write a column about the media, because I feel as though there are a lot of factors and forces along the lines of what we just saw with Trump in 2016 that still exist today. The media is challenged by a lot of and now, Jim, I have to say, alternative media reaches a lot of people. I mean, Joe Rogan reaches 11 million people. Russell Brand, the All In podcast. That's what you're talking about. The Tech Bros, where they sit down and they can't kiss RFK Jr.'s butt enough. And one of them, David Sachs, who's one of the founders of PayPal, had a fundraiser for RFK Jr. He's big on the RFK Jr. Now, again, you may listen to these conversations and go, well, there's some stuff that RFK Jr. says that I agree with, but it's super dangerous, the idea somehow that he would dismantle the levers of government.
His main plank is that he's going to dissolve the FDA and there's other agencies, which look, nobody's perfect, and I'm not defending the FBI spied on Martin Luther King, broke into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office with help from other people. I mean, they have done terrible things. J. Edgar Hoover was an awful man. But, you have to take those case by case, not with a broad brush and say we ought to eliminate the FBI. I don't think you can do that. And the Department of Justice, the Biden administration, I must say, has bent over backwards not to influence anything in the Hunter Biden investigation, anything in the Donald Trump investigation. They have handled it exactly how you expect a president to handle it. While RFK wants to eliminate all these things, he's Trump on fire is what he is as far as those agency things. It's terrible.
And here's the way that stuff resonates, and then I'll let you go. It resonates because people know that the FDA and the FAA and I'd suggest even the SEC, many of these government agencies are victims of regulatory capture, right? Where the things they are regulating are so powerful, so wealthy, that they overtake the agency's ability to really regulate them, restrain them in any way. So you've seen this in those agencies.
Right.
I mentioned Wall Street and the pharmaceutical companies.
Well, the FAA didn't stop Boeing from making that plane that was crashing. Okay, the USDA. Most people don't know that, but that stamp on your meat that says USDA inspected, it's not inspected by USDA. It's inspected by the people who own the meat plants, and then the USDA comes in and looks at their records and says, "Okay, you're doing the inspections fine." They don't actually look at the meat, so. There are problems. I covered the agencies for ABC for 4 years. I know that they have problems. I reported on those problems, but you can't eliminate them. You can try to reform them and get better people in there, and you can change the regulations. You should not be having these incredibly rich companies inspecting themselves. And of course, we both know that the main problem with politics and the main problem with there's two problems in America. That if we fix them, we would be better off. Number one, the problem is the money in politics, the fact that that lobbyists control everything and they stop all good legislation. Lobbyists, they need to be regulated more than they are. Secondly, is income inequality, which is the root cause of all this crime we're having, the homelessness we're having. That really is a problem for America. So those are the two problems. We fix those. I think everything else falls in line.
You can find him here on Fridays. We'll usually pick up another day with Jim Avila because we like to talk about his column. The latest is interesting. It's how to cover RFK Jr. You can find it at Barrett Media, but you can also just follow Jim Avila on Twitter for the moment. You going to stay on Twitter, Jim, or are you going to begin to migrate on to another platform?
Look, if somebody finds a good other platform, I'm gone. I'm going to be happy to. But right now there isn't one. Maybe this thing with Facebook, what does it call it with Meta? It's going to be
they
something.
seem serious about it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
signed
If
up.
it works, I'll work it. Did you?
Yeah, just to be on it. But anyway, he's on Twitter now, Jim Avila, ABC. We'll talk to you Friday, and on Friday, I'd like to talk about the Supreme Court and how essentially the Supreme Court has so seized power that now we're a country completely run by this Supreme Court and the courts in general. Jim Avila, everybody, come on. Thanks, Jim. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.